Welcome to Career Chats, the podcast series brought to you by Michael Page. How can you harness data to boost happiness at work? And should you be considering your well-being over salary in your next career move? In this video, we share some highlights from our Career Chats podcast with Nic Marks, CEO and founder of Friday, where he explores the data and economics of happiness in the workplace.
Welcome, Nic Marks.
Hi.
I guess it could be said that you've devoted your life and career to happiness. Is that right?
It has sort of turned out that way. You know, it's kind of a bit of a random walk, but I've ended up at happiness, which is not a bad place to end up. It's a debate that's gone back to ancient Greece, isn't it? Like, What is the purpose of life? And, you know, the life well lived, is it about happiness? Is it about pleasure? Is it about meaning? And I think people have always thought about that. And probably as we've sort of become richer as nations over the last couple of 100 years, and particularly recently, you know, our just survival has just been taken care of. And then I think it becomes like, what's life for? What's the purpose of life? And probably happiness is the way that we humans mainly think about it.
Wow, that's a deep opening one. So I'm really interested to kind of drill down into that. First of all, your working life, but also how happiness can be applied to people's working life. But I also wanted to talk about the Happy Planet Index, because you're thinking about happiness on a much broader scale as well, aren't you? Tell us a bit about what it is.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm a slightly grandiose creature, I think, on big scale. And I worked on big quality of life indicators since the 90s. I'm a statistician by trade. So I come into happiness with thinking about how do you measure it. And I started off measuring quality of life and moved into well-being and happiness, you know, later in my career. But I was interested in how nations, you know, what do we think about what national progress is, and you know, and so I started thinking on that, and eventually produced what was called the Happy Planet Index, which is actually a very simple indicator, and it's to take on GDP. It's to say that surely that you can't measure quality of life just by how much stuff we have and how much we consume. It's got to be about our experience of life, and the Happy Planet Index tries to capture that by saying that, you know, how do we measure good lives? And I would say it's yes, how long we live. You want to live a full life, but it's how happy you are. You want to live a good life. But then the Happy Planet Index, and the word planet is in there, is about actually sustainability, and it's saying how much of the Earth's resources do we use to get there. So it's sort of a bang per buck indicator. It's how much happiness and well-being do we get for our ecological resource use. And it came up with that idea. I didn't actually name it the Happy Planet Index. I named it Sustainable Wellbeing Index, and it wouldn't. No one would have read it at all.
Yeah, interesting.
and someone said, "Why don't we call it Happy Planet?" I thought, yeah, that's better. And it went absolutely ballistic when it came out in 2006. And strangely, no one had thought about things like that before. I thought it was a very simple idea, and I do think simple ideas can cut through things. And you know, it got into so much media around the world when it was released, because it rank ordered nations, and that's statistically, that's very playful.
Oh, yes. Journalists love a good list.
They love a good list, and it's like, and we deliberately did that to get sustainability on the agenda.
And how much traction has that index, the Happy Planet Index, continued to have? Because I remember David Cameron was talking about happiness of the UK when he was Prime Minister for a while, but then, you know, stuff got in the way. You know, I won't mention Brexit, I just did, but, you know, how much currency can it have amongst our leaders and the way they shape their kind of policies? So
one of the things we campaigned for when I was at the New Economics Foundation was that the UK should have a national indicator of well-being, that we should, if we want to understand the well-being, the happiness of the population, we need to measure it. And actually Cameron, to give him credit, did put that in about 2011. And the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, is the only national statistics agency in the world that has a national indicator of well-being. People get worried if you measure it as if you're sort of missing the point by putting a number on it. But if I ask you a question like, you know, so, you know, how happy were you at work this week? So I've time bound it. I've said this week. Right. You know, I say 1 to 5, from very unhappy to very happy. Well, you know, how happy were you at work this week?
My honest answer is it's been a pretty good week, actually.
So
I'm going to say 4 to 5.
Yeah, okay. And so you can put a number on it, and people can do. And if they've got a 1, 2, a bad week, they know about it. And if they're steadily just a 3 and okay, all I can say about that is that they're not doing their best work. You know, if you're just okay at work, you're getting along. But I don't suppose you're the most creative. I don't suppose you're in the best team you've ever been in, and you're having the best experience. And so, okay, after a while, gets a little bit heavy. And so, you know, if you can be in a workplace where you've got many more good weeks than bad weeks, we're all going to have bad weeks. There's going to be stress. Something's going to happen. You're going to fall out with someone. A project's going to go wrong. IT is going to break. Whatever it is, there are things going to happen. But how quickly do you bounce back from that? That's the sort of stuff that you can pick up. And I'm a big fan, like Happy Planet Index, of doing very simple numbers to open up spaces for people to talk about. Because ultimately, the numbers aren't going to change anything. It's what people do with them.
And to bring us a bit up to date, tell us about kind of your main thrust of activity career-wise now.
I just started thinking that, we spend a lot of time at work, happiness at work. I've got these skills about measuring happiness. There's got to be something here. And just really started to create a business which is sort of to take on staff surveys, which, if you say to people, have you done a staff survey, their sort of whole energy sinks as they think of a long, boring form that they've got to fill out.
So true.
Yeah, and then they press the send button and then they never hear anything about it at all. And I wanted to create something which was much more tactile, much more responsive, and much more energetic than that. And that's ultimately what we've now created, and we call it Friday.
And so tell me a bit more about that. Is that an employee happiness index? Happy colleague index.
Yeah, we basically create what we call a happiness KPI for a business. So it's to sit with their other KPI, their other key performance indicators, but it tells you how happy every team is every week. And as I said with that question I asked you earlier, our time duration is a week, because people work in week sprints just naturally, Monday to Friday. I mean, that's why we're called Friday, because it's a working day, it's a happy day, but it ends the week. So our measurement is at the end of the week, you look back on the week and reflect. And we help team leaders understand how their team are doing every week. You can create this thing called positivity resonance in a team by actually, if I thank you for the work you've done, you feel good for being thanked. I feel good for thanking you. But then if we share that with the whole team, everyone sees that you've done something good. And so it just resonates around the group. And positive emotions are really critical for work, in the sense that, when we're enthusiastic, we're curious, we're interested, we're supportive to our colleagues, everything goes well. Every organization will have a culture, whether they name it, that have values, which they often name, but they're often really terrible at actually implementing. I was with a CEO this week and he said, oh yeah, we've got these values. And I asked him what they were. And he went 1, 2, and then, what was the third one? And this is the CEO.
Right.
Yeah. And so actually, how do you implement those things and how do you get them? And I think you do that by doing something very regularly. That's why it's weekly. And you create easy to understand data. Basically, you're creating good, bad signals in the organization. Is this going well? Is it not?
How do teams go about implementing strategies that are built up off the back of the happiness scores that you measure?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we have sort of that very fast way of thinking at a team level, but there is also a slower, strategic, more considered way that organizations need to think, which is looking at the overall pattern. So using the 5 ways, or using the data on how teams are happy or not, and thinking about how can they implement sort of organizational wide strategies. So that might be about how do they support line managers to have better conversations at a team level. And often line managers are kind of promoted for their technical skills and not their people skills, and they feel slightly out of their depth. And if they're not supported by the organization, that's actually unfair on them. So how do you support a line manager to lead a great team? And so sometimes I run workshops, we call it managing for happiness, but it's how do they do that, and how do they set up that pattern? And then also an organization might look at, perhaps they can see that creativity or learning is weak across certain sectors, certain parts of the organization. Well, how can they put in training or put in challenges to people to be more creative or learning? What are their learning budgets like? Do they give people autonomy over their learning budgets? Can they go and choose things which look slightly sort of horizontal rather than vertical about what they're doing? But a lot of organizations find that allowing people to volunteer, for example, can help them pick up new skills that are business ready. And it's not a traditional way of training people. And I think these more creative things are very, very good. So other examples might be, there's a shocking statistic that only 40% of people take their annual leave, full annual leave. Mm-hmm. And actually encouraging people to take their full annual leave will help them recover, help them have less burnout, and to leave work behind. Work's very 24/7 these days. Well, actually, we know one organisation where they paid a bonus if you didn't answer an email while you're on holiday. So actually helping you switch off. So there were things like that these organizational wide things can be act on quite strategically. But that's really helping senior leaders, HR, people directors to sit back and think about those big picture things.
And what about as an employee? Like, what advice would you give to someone who maybe is feeling, the number 3 that you talked about on the scale, works okay. It's not that it's terrible, but week after week, I'm giving myself a 3 in terms of the happiness. And I don't really feel that this is kind of, it's not sparking joy to talk about another person, to use a phrase from someone else who kind of talks about happiness.
When you're very unhappy, you kind of know you've got to jump, and you do. It's burning. It's on fire. And when you're really enthusiastic, you're on fire in the positive way. Right. In the middle, there's sort of nothing going on, is there? And it's like But think of those 5 ways of connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire. Which of those is not getting met? Because some of them won't be getting met as your sort of needs. And either try and find a way to do that in your job, in your role, or find a horizontal career path. Is often difficult to just get a promotion, but you could find ways to move in the same organization if it's big enough, or jump ship. But next time, and when you go to change job, of course you want to take care of salary. But don't fall into the mistake that an extra 5,000 is going to make you happy. If you walk into a toxic environment, you're going to feel bad again. You'll feel much better taking a job that you like the people, that you can see where you can stretch and grow, that you can see that you're going to work with someone that's going to let you do your own work, and that you like what the business or the organization does. If you find what they're doing interesting and inspiring, you'll be happier. And that will be much, much better for you than a few extra thousand. So be careful about chasing the money. Don't ignore it. It's important. But actually look at those other things much more.
To hear more from our guests, including their extraordinary careers and expert advice on topics such as workplace inclusion, mental well-being and work-life balance, make sure you subscribe to the Career Chats podcast, available on Audioboom, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, to get the episodes as soon as they drop.